Thank you. It's lovely to be here yet again, this time from Tel Aviv. I think in the past I've only spoken to you from LA and Denver, so I'm back home. Very interesting, not easy times now to be back home, but home, is where my heart is, and that's Tel Aviv in Israel. So thank you, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Moadim l'simcha. And as Shirel noted, we have a detective story today, kind of a very interesting detective story. And here we go. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to take you on a trip to do with this painting called From Darkness to Light. It's a painting by Jozef Israëls. He's a Dutch painting. It was done in the late second half of the 19th century. And it's a restitution case, okay? Art restitution, I'm just gonna maybe clarify the term that we're gonna use throughout this lecture. Restitution is when the hires or the owners of an artwork or object or even a piece of land, okay, that was taken under wrongful law or under wrongful position, was taken by force, and these hires would like to gain their ownership back on this piece of artwork or land. I want to clarify just beforehand that I am not a restitution professional. I am a curator. I had to deal with restitution as part of our collection and what happened in our museum work. But there are professionals, there are people that this is what they do in life, and they have all of the knowledge, expertise, and information about restitution, especially to do, it could be very specific, and we could be Second World War looted art from France, okay, it could be German. It's such a wide scene that their expertise are in very, very specific fields. That saying, I want to take a minute to recognize where I'm talking from. And you can see this is a picture of the Hostage Square that is just outside the Tel Aviv Museum. You see in the background is the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. And unfortunately, these days, the Tel Aviv Museum of Art has changed its facade. It's changed its position, and we are hosting and we are taking part, and we're trying as much as we can to support the families and friends of the hostages and all of Am Yisrael that are really struggling to release these people who were kidnapped from their homes and from their families. And I thought that it was so appropriate that the name of the artwork that we're going to talk about now today is From Darkness to Light. And also in the prayer that we say for the hostages, we say, bring them from distress to relief, from darkness to light. So I am really dedicating this hour to the hostages, and may we all see them come out of the darkness and back into the light, back into our hearts and back into our life. And I really, really want to pray together with you that this will happen. So with that saying, I want to tell you what happened to us not too long ago. The museum received a letter, 2018, and this letter was from something called the Mosse Art Restitution Project, which I never heard of beforehand, and it was addressed to Mrs. Susan Landau, who was the director of the museum at the time. And it told us a story about an artwork that was part of our collection. I knew of the artwork, but I did not know all of the story behind it. So before I tell you a bit more of the story of this piece of art, the Mosse Art Restitution said that this piece of artwork used to belong to the Mosse family collection. Now, before we dive into all the details, let's talk about the art, okay? What is this painting about, and does it have any importance or significance at all in the art world? So as I said beforehand, Jozef Israëls, he was a Flemish Jewish painter. He was very well known at the time. He grew up in Amsterdam and he studied in Paris. And he was a descendant of a very long tradition of Flemish painting, very academically taught oil painting. But he was also sometimes called the Rembrandt, the Dutch Rembrandt. And you can see that he uses very, very dark colors with highlights of light colors. In this scene, we see the interior house of a peasant's house. We can see it's not very elaborate, not a lot of decorative. And we see the woman on the left side sitting down, crying, covering her eyes. Her little girl is by her knees. And on the right side, we see that there are undertakers taking out a coffin. And we understand this is a very delicate situation. And this is when somebody died, deceased, and these are the minutes when they are separating from their house. They are taken out. And it's a very intimate moment. It's not very, we see a lot of paintings that depict, let's say, the family next to the bed of the sick, right? When somebody's dying. We know that in the history. But this is kind of a different development, a different moment in this mourning process. It's could be very personal. Not an easy moment. And we notice that also it's a very simple moment. We can see it's a Jewish family. Can you see that the young boy, he has a yarmulke on his head. The women have head coverings, and we can see also it's a Jewish peasant family. Look at what they're wearing. The kids are wearing these clogs, these very well-known Dutch clogs. It's quite a big painting. Okay, it's large. It's 52 on 80 inches, which is that's a nice size for a painting. And it was, at the time, it was pretty much well known. It traveled from a series of different collections and exhibitions. Jozef Israëls himself was a well-known painter. He had many descendants. It was even told that Van Gogh himself looked at paintings by Jozef Israëls to learn from him. These are self-portraits that he made of himself. He has a whole series of works that are part of this peasant family, fisherman's village, and that's because of his own personal story. He became ill in 1855, so he moved out of Amsterdam and he went into a fisherman's village next to Amsterdam, and he became very intrigued by these very simple families, their life, their everyday suffering and worries, especially when your hardship is dependent on the sea, which a lot is unknown. So you can see this painting here below, which is like the lookout. They're looking for their loved one to come back into sea. These two paintings, the ones that have numbers on top, I left the numbers as I usually do in my lectures, just to make you know that these works are part of the museum, of the Tel Aviv Museum's collection. So these are their catalog numbers, and these are works that we have sometimes hanging, but sometimes they're just in our storage. So this is a lot of his work, and also he also dedicated quite a few works towards more Jewish themes. We can see a Jewish wedding, we can see a Jewish rabbi. Very humble, kind of humanistic feelings, very emotional, very identifying with the situation. Also with the fishermen, and also here we can see that Jozef Israëls feels part of this community. His works, again, were pretty well known. We can even see here there was a stamp taken out, I don't know when, but part of the collection depicting this painting. Now, when we received this letter from the Mosse Restitution company, the first thing that we would do is look at the label. Look, where did the museum receive this painting? And here I photographed on the right side, I photographed the label that we had on the museum wall in the gallery. And what we see, gift of Mr. Moti Rubinstein, Golden Age House, Tel Aviv. Okay, this is called a credit line. Okay, every museum, every place where you see an exhibition and you want to know, where did this painting come from? Okay, who lent this painting, etc. You'll see a credit line. If there's no credit line, it means it belongs to the museum and they acquired it a long time ago, or they have something to hide. Okay, so Moti Rubinstein was somebody who was involved in the museum. By now, he's a very old man. He gave this painting to us in 1993. And at the time, 93, like you received a decent painting. You made sure that the painting was authentic, that's the most concern. You made sure that Mr. Rubinstein actually acquired the painting and did not steal it. And if it was a worthwhile painting, you said thank you, and that's it. You didn't ask any more questions. But we were probably, today, by the way, the procedure is very, very different. But at the time, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about it, but at the time, that was good enough. Okay. But after we received this letter from the Mosse institution, we had to start researching and asking questions. Where did Moti Rubinstein receive this? The first thing that you do when you want to know more about the painting, okay, after you look at the painting and you look at its frame, you have to turn it around. Okay, this is called a verso. Okay, the opposite direction. There is so much you can learn about a painting from its back. Okay, sometimes you see the artist's signature. You can see something that the artist mentioned, a date. Sometimes on the canvas itself, you can see, let's say, even the mark of the stretchers. And there are stickers and different labels. And also in this painting, once we took it down, and I had to ask the special people to come around to take it down because it's a very big painting. With the frame, it's even heavier. And we photographed it and we found these labels. So the first label that is very easy to read, and we also can see it's pretty recent. It was from the Kunsthaus in Zurich. It participated there in exhibition. And you can see the name of the exhibition and the dates of the exhibition, okay, in 1998. Okay, that, is part of our museum history, and it's already in our logs and everything. What else could we see? What else could we find? Well, this is a bit of a different kind of, mark. It looks a bit older. It's a number 711B. Does not say too much to us, but we do begin to understand that this painting has passed through a few hands. And even further, we can see that there's also a label saying the property of Mr. James S. Forbes, and also a number with kind of a Gothic kind of letter, F231. Okay, so this is beginning to tell us a bit more story about this painting. And Mr. Forbes was a Scottish businessman. This is in Google. You can even look at it. He was part of the railroad, setting up the railroad system in Holland, and he was a big art collector. He had many different works of art from the end of the 19th century. Among them, he also had this Israëls. Now, the F231, not really sure, not so easy to know what it is. It is probably a number from an auction. Okay, an auction number when they put up a lot of works for auction. So each work has a number in order for the people to know what they can bid on. Okay, so we're beginning to understand that there's a lot more to learn about this painting. Now, what is this called? This is called provenance research. Again, this is a whole profession. There are people, and this is their job. They have the information. But basically, what we try and do is try to understand what happened to this object of art. It can also be Judaica, it can be many different things, yes? Anything that you want to understand. What happened to it from the moment it left the artist's studio until the present day? Where did it go through? What are the evidence of the different sales? What hands did it pass? Did it participate in different exhibitions? Will you see that in the catalogs? Was it, did it go from different countries? That means that you'll see it in the export and lists of different countries. Are there photographs, maybe even personal photographs that people had of their, people, loved ones that photographed at home, but in the background, you can see the painting was hanging. You're trying to collect as many dates and numbers. And there are many, many different methods, but all of them include a lot of investigation, okay? There's a lot of libraries. You have to go through lists and lists and lists and databases, and then ask the people and write letters to the galleries and write letters to the auction houses that maybe don't even exist anymore, okay? So again, this is a whole profession, and today with the internet, it has become much more easier. But in the 1990s, it was people who went through different archives and really worked very hard in order to collect all of this information. So back to our work of art, luckily, okay, the Mosse Art Institution, together with the Free University of Berlin, they did the whole Provenance report for us, okay? And this report is very, that's how they actually asked for the piece of art. They say, this is our evidence, okay? So it's very detailed. Every single number, every single date has a reference, has a record, has something that it can be based upon. And together with that, yes?
I'm just cutting. So when they wrote to you about this work, they were actually asking for you to give it back?
So it was a bit of a stages. In the beginning, they wrote about the work. They said they're suspected, and they asked us for any information that we have in our records. And also they asked us for photographs of the back. Okay. Now, at any certain point, we could say, listen, we're not giving this to you. Okay. We said, no, we're not sharing this information with you. Okay. But I will talk about it a little bit further on down the way, what our ethics were behind this, okay? But we saw, first of all, that the Mosse Institute was a reliable place. They had a history of it. You can go through their internet. They've done restitution on several different objects. I do have other people randomly, writing me emails and saying, oh, I'm the descendants of XYZ. I'd like more information about a painting. So I asked them very kindly, but to show me more evidence and proof. I would not give out information to anybody. This case was a bit more different, okay? So we're following back here. In the list of provenance that was compiled together with all of the information, we understood that this work left the artist studio in 1871, and it traveled through this James Forbes to London, and then it was bought and rebought, and then it was in Munich. James Forbes died in 1904, so all of his collection went on auction. So that's why in 1905 it was purchased by a private collector, and then it went from hand to hand, okay? And that we know indicates that it's a valuable piece of art, because if nobody wanted to buy it, it means that it's not worth anything. But since in the same day, same year, 1906, it moved 3 hands, it means that it was something that was wanted, okay? So in 1906, there's evidence that Mr. Rodolphe Mosse actually bought the painting. But the next step that we have is in 1934, and this date is very crucial. 1944 is after 1933 when the Nazis came into power. So we probably can presume that this auction was a forced sale, okay? Because if it happened before 1933, it's a bit more tricky. We can say, well, the family did it from their own will, but it is a professional knowledge that is already pretty much established that any sales or any auction after 1933 were forced sales. Now, there is a 60-year gap. That's a long time where this piece of art was undercover. We do not know. Don't know who bought it, don't know where it was possessed, did it pass from hand to hand, who owned it, how did they keep it? We do not know, and no evidence could be found. It did resurface in 1993, when again it changed a lot of hands in the same year until it came to us in the museum. Now, a little bit into parentheses about what is looted art, or what happened to the art world within the years of Second World War. And it is well known that Hitler himself was a very maybe deprived artist. He wanted to be an artist. He was not accepted into art school. And then when he came into power, he decided that he's going to re-educate everyone into what is proper art. And within that, he started collecting and taking into his power all of the art that he considered to be degenerate art. That means art that is not appropriate for the German people, that does not have the aesthetics or the moral values that he wants his people to be educated or seen by. And he even put together a huge exhibition that traveled around Germany in 1937 of degenerate art. And he also invested a lot of time and resources during the war, a lot. We know this, a lot has been written. I'm sure you can read the books that he had a whole system of collecting art and then selling what he didn't want, taking what he wanted. He wanted to open a whole museum in Linz and storing whatever he could. So this was a part of the system, also the part of the German values to re-educate to new art. It is estimated that over 600,000 works of art were displaced during the Second World War. And that's a lot. And this does not include anything about books, Judaica, which there's far more, or other pieces of art. And this is an amazing photograph, not necessarily of artworks, but one of the warehouses of the Allies after the end of the war, where they started to gather all of the possessions that were taken by the Nazis. And it's a huge amount of numbers, and they had to try and understand what to do with all this work, with all these objects, with all these pieces. And it was a mission of the Allies together to see how they're going to re-find the owners. What in fact happened is the Allies did not have time or the structure to try and find the owners, especially when all of Europe was totally demolished, trying to rebuild itself. So in fact, what happened that a lot of the different works of art were just given out to different museums and institutions. And then it was believed that maybe the owners would come and find them. But at the moment, but until the 1990s, nothing much happened, okay? So a lot of artworks were given to museums or institutions. The Judaic pieces and the art, the Torah scrolls and that kind of thing was divided between Jewish institutes, Some of the works eventually arrived in Israel, but not much was done. Only in the 1990s, think about it, 60 years, nearly 60 years after the end of the World War II, did the thought, the recognition start to understand that these countries should be more proactive and something should be done about this. And then 44 countries gathered together to what was created the Washington Principles, which were called for a national process in each country in order to locate works of art and try and find, listen what it says here, alternative resolutions. Not necessarily to try and find the hires, but to try and find like what to do with this problematic art. The only thing is that these principles were very nice. The countries signed on them, even Israel signed on them on the State of Israel, but it did not have any teeth. It did not really call into action. And nothing really changed. Only a very slight number of countries, Germany and maybe 2 other countries, actually set aside money and resources to create a special office in order to deal with this. The rest, nothing. In 2009, there's another call of action from the, it's called the Terezin Declaration, that's where they met. And this is a bit more calling for countries to be proactive. Not only to say, okay, we have in our museums, in our collection, artworks that belong to people who were displaced during the World War II, but also to proactively find the hires of the artworks itself. Now, what really, yeah.
There's a question, if you can go back one slide, there's a question about the photo here and what the art is that we're seeing in it.
Okay, it's really, I don't know. It's a photo that illustrates the ideas. I cannot say it looks like some sort of sculpture that was taken from, I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't help too much.
It's a beautiful
photo that this is how it's stored. Let's say they found these huge train carts full of artworks. And let's say a lot of time the canvases were torn off from their frames and rolled up. And then sometimes they kept the frame, sometimes they not. Like the artists, the works of art did not look as what you would find in the museum. They had a different storage system. Okay, so what else really helped this whole restitution process? And this is when a popular culture can really help make a difference. And I'm sure many of you have read the book, The Lady in Gold, or seen the movie, or maybe actually seen the portrait of Gustav Klimt, which is in the Neue Gallery in New York, which is a fantastic piece of art. But this is a true story that was written and then made into a film of Maria Altmann, that this work belonged to her family. And after the war, she had to fight the Austrian government, and then through the Supreme Court in the US, she sued the government in Austria in order to retrieve this piece of art. It was a very popular movie. Now I forgot, Helen Mirren, I think, starred in it. And it really helped to surface the idea that there are many more cases. There is much work to be done, and it could be fought. Because many of the descendants, the first generation, just gave up, okay? Maria Altmann was the first generation. She does remember this painting hanging in her grandparents' living room, but many of that just generation, after all they went through, did not want to fight about it. And if you read the book, you understand it was a tough fight. It was not easy, but they understood that it's worth the fight, and it is possible. Now back to our case, back to the Mosse Foundation. once we received the letter, I understood that this is a foundation that is very well funded by a San Francisco-based law firm, together with the university in Berlin, where they have all the professionals who are doing this research. But who is Mosse? Who is Rodolphe Mosse? Okay, so first of all, about this man, he was an entrepreneur. He came from a very simple family that were immigrants from Poland, and he arrived in Germany as a young person, and he set up a very big publishing company, okay? And in this publishing company, and you can see here, these are books that some of them even we had in our library in the museum. He had a huge catalog of all of what he did. You know, each year he used to take out a catalog of all of his publications. He really understood the power of advertisements. Okay, he was the first one to put in large scale, to use papers, newspapers into publicity. Okay, and he also had his own paper that he was publishing, what was called the Berliner Tageblatt, okay, which was a very well-known, very well-read newspaper, particularly among the liberal left wing in Berlin. Now, this put him in a very difficult position once 1933, when the Germans, when the Nazis came to power. But beforehand, because he died already in 1920, okay, so he didn't see this happening. Who did? And this is, one second, this is his publishing house. You can see it's in a huge location, amazing building, new and old together on the corner of the street. You can see that this is his palace, okay, in Berlin, where he housed his collection. Again, very, very wealthy. And this is a bit about the family tree. By the way, the palace itself during World War II, of course, was confiscated from the family. It was used as headquarters for Nazi police. It was bombed and destroyed by Russian forces. And then nowadays it's rebuilt by one of the heirs of the Mosse family. Now, it's interesting to understand who are the people who established the Mosse Art Restitution Foundation, because Rodolphe Mosse himself died in 1920. He was married to Émilie Mosse, but their child, they could not have children together. So he had a child with their maid, okay, and that's why, yes, but they adopted Felicia as their own daughter. But in fact, Emily was not her natural mother. Now, Felicia was married to Hans Lachmann, and they had 3 children, Rodolphe, Hilda, and George. Now, Hans and Felicia, as you see here, he was a very handsome man. Maybe she was not very photogenic, but they were the heirs of all of this wealth, of this palace, of this publishing company. He died in 1920, his wife died in 1924, and by 1925, Felicia and Hans were owners of a huge property, a huge art collection, and a huge publishing company. Hans was not a very successful businessman as his father-in-law, and slowly the business was deteriorating. But he did not expect that in 1933 he had to give up everything, because all of his property and everything was confiscated by the Nazis, and they all fled to Switzerland and later on to other places, Europe and America. The interesting fact is that Hans divorced Felicia, and he had a second marriage. And the grandson from the second marriage, who his grandfather was not even Hans's son, but Carola's first son from her first marriage, okay? Roger Strauch, this guy here, he is the one that is head of the Mosse Foundation. So it doesn't really matter if you have the blood from the genes, or you have the lawful suit in order to retrieve these artworks. Roger does not have any sentimental value of these artworks. How could he? Yes, he has no memories of his late great-grandfather or great, he has nothing connected, but by law, he is the descendants and the hire of all of this huge enterprise that was there, that belonged to the Mosse family. So today, who's the head on leading this Mosse Foundation is Roger and Rudolf. Descendants, Hilde and George never had any children. Okay, so this is the man that's standing behind this foundation. And to understand a bit more, the Mosse family was extremely wealthy, extremely wealthy. I'm talking about they had this palace that eventually was opened up to the public once a week in order for people to wander around like a museum. And it was not only artworks, there were rare books, furniture, antiques, textiles, and they had this catalog showing their artworks. And this I found in our museum, in the Tel Aviv Museum of Art. I did a search for Mosse and I found books and I found this catalog. In page number 2, there's like a portrait of Rodolphe Mosse telling about him. And what do I find in page number 5? The painting that is hanging in my gallery. So I could not ask for more evidence saying that this painting actually belonged to the Mosse family. Now, I am in this parenthesis saying that this painting has replicas, there are different versions, so you do have to check it exactly the same size, you do have to check that it looks exactly the same, because there are various replicas of this painting, but I did have evidence here in my own library of the museum. Moreover, very easily found on the internet, you can find the catalog of the auction, the Lepke auction house, which are an auction house that is well known, that cooperated with the Nazis in order to auction out Jewish property. And in this catalog, there isn't a photograph of the painting, but it is listed that this painting, From Darkness to Light, is presented for auction. So we felt, the Tel Aviv Museum of Art really felt that we did not have any moral will or right to say, no, this painting belongs to us. And we received it, innocently. It's not like that we received it knowing, but we did receive it innocently, but we did have a lot of understanding for this cause, and understanding that we are, in our possession of the museum, there's a work of art that actually is not, that originally belonged to a Jewish family, and it was taken from them forcefully. Now, the museum itself, as I said beforehand, today has made a great shift. And we do have somebody that today comes twice a week, and she is in charge of provenance research for our different artworks. But until this case, it was not very significantly taken into account that we have to take responsibility about our collection. What we did understand, that we are willing to try and work towards what is called a just and fair solution. And this is a term that was coined already in the Terezin agreement that we talked about in 2009, where both sides, the museum and the hires, would try and work together in order to make it happen, okay? To make this recognition happen. You have to understand that the hires of these artworks or objects do not necessarily have an emotional attachment to these objects, okay? They did not necessarily see them, live with them, or have people telling them stories about them. But they do know that it belonged to their families, and they are lawful heirs of their families. So they don't necessarily want to reclaim and put the object back in their house, but they do want to receive a just solution. And this I'm pointing out because the Mosse Foundation went through a lot of different restitution agreements before it came to the Tel Aviv Museum. And this is an example. If you walk into the Pergamon in Berlin today, in the entrance, you see this lyre by a German sculptor called August Gaul. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. And if you read the label, you walk up closely and you read the label of this piece of art, you see the provenance. And you see, it says here that it belonged to collection of Rodolphe Mosse. And then in 1933, it was confiscated. And all of the dates are told and written down. And then it says 2016, okay, it was restitution and then purchased by the Pergamon, or given funds to purchase it. So this is an example for a fair and just solution, okay? The people who of the family don't necessarily want the work back in their possession, okay? They don't have any connection to the piece of art. They do have a connection to the story itself, to its history. So in many cases, what is agreed upon is the institution buys the work from the family and adds this label, the Provenance label, which is, you can see it in a lot of museums in Germany, okay? Not necessarily in other places, because it's a well-known practice in Germany. Now, what are we doing? We asked the family, the Mosse institution, if we can do something similar. We did not have the funds yet, but we did ask them if we can exhibit the piece of art, which you can see here in the background, for 1 more year with a table explaining the story, okay, giving the dates and giving the information that I researched and we collected, and telling the story of the Mosse family about art restitution and about this work of art. And this is what is called a fair and just solution. Fortunately, eventually the museum found the funds, and I'm very happy that it happened, okay, to purchase the work of art from the family. And today you can see this, well, you can't because it's a war, we don't have all of our works around out, but the work of art is exhibited in the hall together with our beautiful Gottlieb, which is a different CSP program that we did, and with a detailed label explaining the whole situation and explaining the whole story. This is a fair and just solution. Now, I would so much like to end my presentation with this, but it does not, since we received another letter in July 2020 from the same place, from the same Mosse Foundation. And we're still in the works with the other piece of art, notifying us, this time it's Mrs. Tanya Cohen-Uzieli, because the director already changed, that we have in our possession 2 huge tapestries that were also part of the Mosse family. Now, unlike the piece of work of art from Jozef Israëls, which I knew about, which is exhibited, which I could locate easily, these tapestries I've never seen before. I didn't know about them. I had to read, first of all, to understand, do they really belong to us? Tapestries, Flemish 17th century tapestry is not my expertise. So first of all, to understand what it is 2 very, very big pieces of art, where you can see one of them is depicting Moses rescued from the bushes. The other one is the crossing of the Red Sea. So here's like a detailed, you can see here Moses and the pharaoh's daughter, very, let's say, fashion dated to the Dutch 18th century. And here, this is the crossing of the Red Sea. You can see even Moses with the horns. At the time, that's what they believed. And we had to find this work of art. We had to pull it out from our storage places and roll it out. And this is me sitting here by the tapestry, and you can see how big it is. It's huge. It's absolutely something that it's also the museum today, we really exhibit modern art, contemporary art. We do not, like tapestry is not part of our exhibit list. So it was very interesting to find out. And then I did a bit of research within the museum to understand when was the last exhibited. And in 1971, when this building was opened, okay, and then opening ceremony of the building, you can see the two tapestries were hanging on the hall, in the front hall, where today we have the Roy Lichtenstein Museum mural. And that was when the last time it was exhibited. Here are the historical photographs from the time. Now, unlike from darkness to light, where the museum did have interests, okay, we did want to keep the work. We had something to felt that had artistic value. These works do have artistic value, but they are not necessarily the museum's expertise or knowledge. So again, the whole story of the resources and to also research it. This piece does not appear in the Lepke Auction House catalog, but we do understand that it was nationalized. It was taken from all the Jewish property was taken in 1933. So we understood, and also it does appear in one of the catalogs of the Mosse Palace. So we had evidence that it is part of the Mosse collection. But this time we did not have the will to buy it. So we did receive an agreement, we did come to an agreement that we would give it back to the family. What we did ask them, we understood together that they would pay for the shipping, okay? Because these huge pieces of works of art with the insurance, with everything, could cost a few, tens of thousands of dollars, and they took upon themselves to receive it, to ship it. It went into auction and sold. It's not, again, these are not pieces of work that they wanted back. They just want to, receive the amount of money for it. And we deaccessioned it. It means it's not part of our collection anymore. Thank God that was the last letter that we received from the Mosse Institution. But I'd like to conclude with just a few ideas. How come this is happening now in the early 21st century? How come we're having so many restitution cases? The awareness is much more higher. So I have a few ideas. The first one would be that the members of family that have survived, who have the living memories, who have the knowledge, are getting older and older. And this is like their last time that you can really take the information out of them, because otherwise you wouldn't know at all that they exist, that these works were part of the family's higher history. Now, most of the people who deal with the restitutions is not the second generation, it's the third generation. The second generation is too emotionally attached and does not usually want to go through the whole, which is very tiresome. It's a lot of work in order to receive the provenance report, in order to go through all the legal authorities for this restitution. But the third generation and fourth generation feels more comfortable. Again, they are not emotionally attached to the object. They're emotionally attached maybe to the story, but the object does not mean anything for them. And they are willing to do it. Moreover, today, the internet and the digital correspondence by email makes all of this research, the provenance research, so much more easier. You don't have to travel to Germany. You don't have to look through the archives. So much of it already is on the internet. There's websites, There's information that you can write and receive the website. It is made easier to do, especially for a generation that is very accessible to technology and knows how to deal with it. Of course, the media, the movie, the different articles that come out, books about the subjects also help aware the awareness. And last but not least, institutions and governments have come to the acknowledgement that it is their responsibility to be proactive about this situation, okay? We cannot have the moral, it's not moral for these institutions to wait for the hires to come to us in order to look for their works of art. It's our responsibility, especially in Israel, to find these owners and give them back their works. So also morally, the institutions have gone a long step. That's saying that still today, many institutions do not want to return their art, and I can understand them. If somebody came and claimed the klimt that we have on the wall here in the Tel Aviv Museum, the process would have been much more difficult. And I know that, and I take it upon myself. So with that saying, I want to come back to our darkness and light and really wish for all of us a very happy Passover, and pray together from darkness to light for all of our hostages to come back. Thank you very, very much for being with me. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to.
Yes, I have a few. There are a few that came along the way, so I'm just going to jump into the questions. If you have more questions, please place them in the chat and I will ask them for you. One question is, I'll go through the quick ones first. Where are the tapestries now?
I don't know. They were bought. They were put on auction. They were bought by a private person. I don't know.
Okay. When you rebuy the work, does the money go to the family? Does it go to the institution? How is that just and fair that the people that happen to be the last in the chain pay for the sins of 80 years ago? Like, how is that just and fair?
No, the money goes to the Mosse Art Institution, which is set up by the hires. Okay, so the hires are really the first.
The hairs, I think.
Hairs.
I think so. I wasn't sure myself, so I didn't correct you throughout the presentation, but I think.
Okay, So yes, exactly. So they do receive in the end their money, and it's their decision what to do with the work of art.
But how is it fair that the last institution is the one?
You're right. You know, it wasn't our fault. We innocently received that artwork, but we are held responsible for it. And I can say today, we do not receive any artwork without a thorough provenance research in order not to be in that situation again.
Another question that came in was, are the laws for works that were looted during World War II the same as the laws or the agreements that are about like looted work from, stuff that is from Egypt and exhibited in Britain and stuff like that? Or is it a totally different?
It's a very different field. It's very different. They're both called art restitution, and it's still a very hot topic. And I'm sure you've all heard of the Benin bronzes from the British Museum. Some of them have been restitutions, but it's not the same. It's a different case. It's different times, different people, different situations, different wars. So, and again, it's not a law. There's no really written law taken through government.
One more request, if you can show the family tree again, just because kind of understand that very, and it's also, I will say, very surprising that it goes by law. And as you said, it's not about the sentiment or the blood connections, but rather about the lawful relations.
So here we are again. So Felicia Mosse was the daughter of Rodolphe. Okay, she married Hans. Hans and Felicia got divorced. Hans remarried Carola. That's his second marriage. She had a son from her first marriage, Carl. And Carl's son, Roger, is the one of the head of the institution, together with the higher supporter.
Thank you. And another question, which I don't know if you can disclose, was how much was the sum of rebuying the painting?
Okay, it wasn't so.
We won't tell everyone. It's just going to be recorded and online.
It was not so much. Let's say it was around 25,000 euros.
Okay.
More or less. We had to receive specific funding because we don't, the museum itself, you know, hardly buys any works of art. And if we do, it's on the Israeli works of art, and that's a few $1,000s, not that amount. So we did receive special donations and fundings in order for this work. But again, it wasn't over our heads. We could do it. And we thought it was important enough to do it. And I'm happy to share the story with you. There is an article, Shirel, you can send it out. There's an article by the Jerusalem Report, I think, that was written about it, and etc. And it's an interesting story. Listen, who would think that in an Israeli art museum, we are holding works that belong to Jews that were persecuted during the Holocaust? You know, it's a very difficult situation. And we're trying much more today to take responsibility about it.
Well, Sophia, thank you so much. It is fascinating to hear and to understand all of these connections. I will say that those of you who are joining us for the Israel art trip in May, which still have 2 spots left, I'll just say, we'll also meet Sophia at the museum, as well as seeing what is now up on the wall where the tapestries once hung. We're in for a beautiful, amazing trip that is all about seeing Israel through the arts. If you're interested, you can email me directly. I'll send you the itinerary. As I mentioned, we have 2 spots left. It's a very small group because it's a very, we're doing stuff that can't be done in a large group. So it's a very limited size group. That's why I'm saying we only have 2 more spots.
Yeah, and let's add also that I'm giving another talk in 2 weeks' time.
Right, that is true. We have another talk with Sophia in about 2 weeks, I think. Yes, on May 21st. I'll be both with the group in Israel and somehow hosting Sophia online because I can be in 2 places at once. And it's going to be about the sacrifice of Isaac, about the work by George Segal. So also quite a fascinating, convoluted story with so many connections. It's just lovely to have you here. People here are asking about the Israel tour dates. They're from the 19th to the 27th of May, but you'll have my email in the follow-up email, and you can email me directly and I'll give you all the details. Thank you everyone for being here. Have a lovely Pesach. Have a good day, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are, and we'll see you in future programs. Toda rabba.
Good night, good afternoon.